When I was in my early 20s, I rode a sport bike to work, and I worked in a skyscraper on the 85th floor. Top of the world, I would tell my mom. From that express elevator that made your ears pop to the spectacular view of New York City right from my desk. It all felt sublime. Truthfully, though, there was a bit of a void in me, one that I routinely brushed off as I looked out of those windows. You see, the resume I submitted for that job listed bachelor's degree as in progress. After 6 years of university, I had accomplished only an associate degree, plus a few additional credits that I managed to scrape by. And although I was proud to be working high atop the Empire State, I knew my academic record was mediocre. As I zipped down the West Side Highway early that Tuesday morning, I opened the visor of my helmet to let in the crisp 65-degree air. With a bright blue sky and hardly a cloud in sight, that was a near perfect late summer morning. Interestingly, as I approached our office front door, I noticed the red and white exit sign above the door adjacent to ours. I thought to myself, look at that. I had never noticed that was an exit. Not giving that much thought, I grabbed some coffee, settled in at my desk, and was accompanied by two other coworkers. We were happily engaged in morning chatter when we heard what sounded like a rocket or a missile. We didn't hear it coming from a distance. We only heard the split-second, ear-piercing zip, and then we felt the explosion. The entire building jolted. Empty chairs rolled a few feet, computer monitors shook violently, and ceiling tiles came down around us. The year was 2001, and I was working in Tower 1 of the World Trade Center. As we grabbed what we could and hurried to leave, my coworker remarked he did not know where the exit was. But I had just seen it that morning, only moments ago. American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the World Trade Center at 8:46 a.m. on Tuesday, September 11th. The aircraft, carrying 92 people and 10,000 gallons of jet fuel, was traveling at 465 miles per hour. The plane hit the north side of the North Tower, between the 93rd and 99th floor. Our office was also on the north side, about 8 floors below. As we were leaving, an unknown man stumbled into our office. His clothing was shredded and his skin was charred. Although he was moaning and relatively incoherent, we didn't think to address his wounds. We just grabbed him by the arm and took him with us into the dark and smoke-filled hallway. I'll never forget the pungent smell of burnt jet fuel. It's sweeter and smokier than the smell of gasoline, somewhat like kerosene. I opened the door to the exit and I felt a stream of cold air rush up from below. The fire above us seemed to be sucking air from lower floors and pulling it upward through the stairwell with a noticeable breeze-like speed. Initially, the stairwell was completely empty. I recall my first few steps down were a mess. My feet couldn't properly gauge the distance between steps, and my hands struggled to find the handrail. Our race down came to a full stop when we encountered a traffic jam of people. We yelled for them to run, to get out of the way. We were aghast and breathing heavily, and they were calm. It was a striking contrast that felt perilous. Some people in the crowd turned to us and, with a warm and calming tone, assured us the line was moving. They transferred to us their sense of patience, a sentiment that was echoed by the exhausted firefighters we later spoke to. The trek down the narrow and crowded stairwell was slow, friendly, and surprisingly, relatively quiet. With nearly 3/4 the length of the building left to descend, the mood was somber and pensive. Time creeped by slowly, and soon it was 9:03 a.m., the time the second plane hit Tower 2. United Airlines Flight 175, carrying 56 passengers and 9 crew members, was traveling at 590 miles per hour when it struck the south side of the South Tower between the 77th and 85th floor. By this time in our descent, we must have been somewhere in the 60s or 70s. The sound of the explosion and the rumble we felt caused a wave of panic in the stairwell. Folks commented things like, "I can't die in here." Others speculated what may have caused the sound. We didn't know. Some people quietly cried. And amid all that, I was battling my own inner turmoil. I had begun thinking about what my legacy would be. I was 24 years old, had hardly any real work experience, hardly any travel experience, and barely a formal education. I felt incomplete. I was ashamed at the thought of having squandered away precious time, years gone with nothing to show for it. Had I died that day, my family would have remembered me as someone they loved and were proud of. But I felt deep down they would also carry a thought of me as someone who failed to make good use of his time, as someone who just scraped by. Imagine for a moment that you were about to have your final thoughts. What would they be? Who would you think about? And how would you grade your life? Rather than succumb to the morbidity of that moment, I tried to find a mental safe space, to think happy thoughts in times of despair, if you will. I envisioned a long, distant future where I would grow to an old age without any of those regrets. In doing so, I made myself a promise that if I survived, I would finish my education. I imagined all aspects of my life would somehow relate to that goal, and in it I would find happiness and love and live a productive life, and eventually fill that void. As we continued our descent, I came to the realization the calm and patience that went viral throughout the stairwell needed to be matched by my own sense of determination and perseverance, and also by a newfound sense of agency. And if I were to survive, those would be the tools I would use to make that vision a reality. A little over an hour after this all began, we finally made it outside. One of the first things we did when we got outside was naturally pause to look up. I saw thick, black smoke billowing out from the Twin Towers in mesmerizing synchronicity. We were awestruck, but the shouts of police officers got our attention and quickly got us moving again. I must have walked but a few steps when I heard a loud crackle coming from above. It sounded like the splintering of thick, rigid plastic. I looked up and saw the top of Tower 2 leaning in my direction. This horrifying ordeal wasn't over yet. I needed another path to safety, but this time I did not have one. I looked through the chaos in search of a way to outrun a falling building, flying debris, and to avoid another traffic jam of people. In my path was a TV news cameraman. He stood out because he was the only person facing the falling building and not running from it. He hoisted a large camera onto his shoulder, stood his ground, and committed himself to facing whatever would come next. I had no time to ponder his courage. I ran past him and down Fulton Street. As people ran, stumbled, and fell to the ground, the enormous plume of dust easily eclipsed smaller buildings and quickly caught up with me. I knelt against the car, took a deep breath, put on my helmet, and closed the visor. I was draped in dust, and as bits of debris pelted me, the ominous hissing sound of the collapse faded into complete silence and brought with it complete darkness. From within my helmet, I tried to take a small breath, but my mouth and the back of my throat were quickly laced in the dry taste of ash. An immediate feeling of claustrophobia hit, and I thought to myself, not here. I can't die here. One option was to stay kneeling and hope, but I would risk dying suffocated by dust. I saw a picture in my mind of a lifeless body, his last moments huddled against a parked car, where he waited to die, helpless, alone, and terrified. But then I thought, well, what if I live? That image of me kneeling powerless would haunt me. I would forever know that I did nothing to save my own life. I had to do something. I would either die trying to survive or succeed and live the rest of my days knowing that I chose to live and that I actively worked at living. As I knelt in total silence, in total darkness, the bit of oxygen in my lungs became a very real limitation, and my heartbeat felt like a ticking clock. My mind scoured through the last few images I had available in short-term memory, and I realized, as I was searching for a path, I saw a group of people up ahead, no more than 5 or 6, darting left into a building. In what felt like an epiphany, I estimated I had ran far enough ahead and was now kneeling precisely where they entered that building. Still unable to breathe and unable to see, I stood straight up. I oriented myself with the hood of that car, and I made as perfect a left turn as I could. I walked a few steps forward and reached the exterior wall of a building. And with a few steps to the side, I felt the wall's edge of an entrance, and then the glass doors of a lobby. I squinted, and through a dusty visor, I saw a blurry image of a crowd. My estimation was correct. The path I chose was right for me. The vindicating feeling of having chosen to take action was coupled with an unexpected reward. Once inside, while the crowd huddled away from the glass doors, I found a working landline telephone at the security guard's desk. I called my mom and told her I was coming home. Later that day, I learned she had seen me on the news.
We're going to show you some videotape now that I think if you have youngsters around, you might want to pay special attention to it, because the portrayal of the violence is extremely graphic. So take a look.
God! Dang it! Look up behind you! Look up behind you! Please, look! Right! Go to the right! Help! Help me, Jesus!
After the dust settled, I began the journey home. On this 2.5-hour walk, the feeling of life-threatening danger would be replaced with that newfound sense of determination. To hug my mom again, to see my family, to start on the next chapter. I found a small washroom in the lobby of that building. After locking the door behind me, I paused for a moment to look at myself in the mirror and take in the enormity of what had just happened. The white dust on my hands and face brought to mind those images I had of me at an old age. I thought to myself, this is your second chance. I used a small sink to scrub away the dust. When I rose, fresh water still dripping from my face, I leaned in, looked into my bloodshot eyes, and with a cracked voice, I said to my reflection, let's go home. One of the most vivid memories I have of that day is of the blurred and narrow view of the route I ran to escape the building collapse. Sure, it was confusing and not at all a straight line, but in it was a destination I committed myself to reaching. Every year on the anniversary of September 11th, I'm reminded of that memory, and I'm reminded of the metaphorical destination I promised myself I would reach. For 16 years, I've worked at finishing my education with patience, with determination, with perseverance, with grit. Parenthetically, you hear me emphasize finish because, as we all know, one never finishes their education, right? Deciding to live a purposeful life does not necessarily stem from having life-threatening experiences, and trauma isn't the prerequisite to establishing a sense of agency. Recognize that the path you're on is yours to control. It's predicated upon how you got here today, what you envision for your tomorrow, and the little things, like the steps you take every single day. Would you stay kneeling as the world threw all it could at you, or would you stand up and take action? My mom hugged me as I got home on the afternoon of September 11th, wearing this very shirt. She hugged me as I wore it again on graduation day for an MBA I earned a decade later. And in but a year or two, I'm planning to hug my mom, my wife, and my 2 boys as I wear this shirt for the very last time, under a graduation gown for a doctorate degree I'm currently working on here at NSU. Through life's uncertainty, through what may feel like a blur or sometimes like chaos. Look through it all and far ahead for a destination. Muster the necessary grit to walk your path and commit to it as if your life depends on it. Because it does. Thank you.